Good morning, everyone. Britt Simon here. How is everybody? Hello, Britt, and welcome to NL. Says Anu, welcome to NL. The 2NLs have come out this week. There's been about 1,300 2NLs sent this week. So it's not, there's nothing. It's just been, perhaps they haven't come to you. So I got an interesting question from a friend of the channel this morning, a couple of friends of the channel. I've had a question from Stoic that I'd like to talk about, and then as questions come in, I'll get onto those. So I asked three questions this morning from Stoic and Philip, and they're concerned about EU, and so I'm going to talk about EU mainly to talk about the visa bulletin that was just released, and also the progress that we're making towards the end of the year, etc., and whether we're whether things are going okay or not. And there's quite a lot of, I think there's quite a lot of diverging opinion on how things are going. So let's talk about that. So Stoic's questions to me, he asked two questions and Philip added on one more. First question, is EU underfilling more likely than it was a month ago and a year ago, in your opinion? Okay, is underfilling. Now, some of you will be surprised that we're even talking about underfilling. Underfilling is a reality that can happen. Essentially, there is no law that says all of the visas have to be given away. Okay, so whilst there are 52,000 visas available this year, which is a reduction from the normal year, there is no punishment for the government, for KCC and the embassies, if they choose to underfill. So underfilling is a possibility, right? Many of you, I think, worry about well, what happens when the visas run out? That actually isn't the problem. And in fact, it's very, very rarely a problem in any year. We've even had a couple of years that have been allowed to go over the cap a little bit. So with the exception of one really disastrous, stupid year where they ended the whole lottery process early, there have been very few years where there's been any sort of cutoff applied at the end of the year. It's normally a bit more organized. However, that's the complete opposite problem to the problem we're having. The problem we're having is that the government are not pushing the visa bulletin fast enough. And because of that, no matter how much capacity there is at the embassies, they're not likely to fill the quota. And so this question is quite perceptive from Stoic. Obviously, I'm sure he's a smart guy. He's obviously thinking about the same things. And there is a possibility that we will see EU underfilled. So let me just show you some sort of data that explains that that situation. And this is going to be kind of interesting for even other regions, Africa and Asia and so on. Let's share my screen a second. Let's make me small. Right. First thing we should look at is here's where we are right now. In middle of May 18th, right? So this is the data that was published on Friday. Well, Poppy wants to talk to you. So as of Friday, there were 10,848 visas issued, plus a few in AP, which we know to be issued. So call that, it's almost 11,000 visas, right? 594 people were in 221G. Those will either go refused or they'll go issued, right? So those are in the pipeline, ready to go. There are 3,475 in ready status. These are people I'm talking about, not cases. And this is for EU. Now, of those, about a third of those cases are no-shows from previous months. They are cases where the 2NL was sent prior to March. And we can assume that people have not even turned up for their interview. Okay, it's sort of a safe assumption. There are some slight nuances to that, but it's sort of a safe assumption to say that if somebody had their interview scheduled, let's say in December, and which would have been for a February date, then and they haven't been marked as issued or refused or whatever, then they were a no-show. So some of you won't realize that these numbers don't represent the full number of people that are ready for interview. These are essentially overstated because some are just never going to turn up. These numbers would never clear out and go down to zero, even if they stopped scheduling. It wouldn't happen, right? So the 3,475 in Europe, about a third of those are previous no-shows, and about 2/3 of those are scheduled cases that will happen over the next couple of months. Now, Europe is on about a derivative rate of between 2.45 and 2.5, roughly. That's a grown derivative rate or mature derivative rate. Remember, people get married during this process. They have babies during this process, and some people, I assume, will die. But generally, the derivative rate increases because people say, "Hey, we should get married, and we're having a baby anyway," or and so people will include their spouse and maybe stepkids, and so the derivative rate grows in every region, including EU. So whilst it started off at about 2.2, 2.25, it's now nearer 2.5, and that's pretty normal. So if there are, let's say, 2,300 people, probably not even that, 2,300 people that are not no-shows, that represents less than 1,000 cases, which makes sense because we know how many cases they schedule month to month. There are still some remaining interviews in May, and they've scheduled last month for June, and of course they're beginning to schedule for July, right? Okay, so and then we can see 15,481 is the total number of people that have been scheduled in EU, and that's yielded nearly 11,000 people, right? If we look at this same time, in fact, I've taken the time slice from last year as being June the 1st. So by the end of May last year, there were 10,073 visas issued by the end of May. And 60 there, so just over 10,100 cases get issued. There were more people in 221G than at this time. That's interesting to me because if Trump was slowing down the processing, we would see a higher number this year than last year, right? For 221G, because there would be more of a backlog being created. But actually, that isn't the case, at least in EU. If we look at that 594 versus 750, seems like that's going pretty normally. If we look globally, this year, the number is significantly lower than this point last year, right? This is last year, 24. And at this point last year, or at the end of June, there were 4,500 people almost on 221G. At this point, there are 3,200. However, you can also see that in 24, the number of issued people globally were 27,000, just over 27,000, nearly 27,250, let's say. Whereas this year, they're already significantly above that by 750, well, nearly 1,000 cases. Okay, or 1,000 people, I should say, not cases. So, many of you will have different impressions, right? Some of you are thinking, oh, the VB is so slow, it's terrible. Why are they going so slow this year? Well, I could argue against that and I could say, yeah, but they've got more issuances in DV25 at the same point than last year. And therefore, they've done pretty well, right? And visas are running out. And some of you that are pessimistic, let's say, are looking at that side of the fence and sort of, assuming that the high issuance number means that everything has gone very well in 25, in fact, better than DV24. And you're looking at the issuances and getting yourself worked up and concerned about that. That's not my concern. That actually is the wrong way to look at it, in my opinion. I've described this to a few people as like saying, look, when I drive a car, I look through the windscreen, I see where I'm going. When you're driving the car, you're looking at the rear view mirror. You're looking at issuances. Issuances is the rear view mirror, okay? You can't tell where you're going by looking at issuances. You can tell where they were. And where they were was they were ahead on scheduling, okay? That's an important concept to understand. The scheduling is what causes the later issuances. So the scheduling is a leading indicator for what's going to happen on issuances. And the scheduling was going well up until the last couple of months, when they have not been increasing the visa bulletin as much as they needed to in order to yield the number of interviews that they need in order to finish off the year. Okay. And this is kind of a global problem, but I'm demonstrating it in the case of EU because I've been asked these questions about EU. And of course, I'm European. So I've got a little bit of a, I've got a little bit of a sort of preference, I guess, for EU. Shoot me. If you don't like that, shoot me. Hang on a second. Let me just ban someone who's being an idiot, rather. An idiot, did I say? Delete comment, put the ban user and delete their comments. Bye-bye, Kim Il-sung, whoever the hell you were. If you spam my chat here, I'm just going to delete you. Okay, so ban you. So don't do that. Don't anybody do that. And for the rest of you, just hold your questions at the moment, because I'm probably going to ignore all these early questions once I've finished this this explanation. So just hold your questions, right? Okay, so people are worried about the issuance numbers, and other people are worried about what the visa bulletin will get to, right? My concern is a little bit different to your concern, I think. Let me just show you what I'm concerned about. I'm looking in the front. I'm looking to the front of the car. I'm looking in the windscreen. I'm looking forward and saying, are they scheduling enough people to reach their goals? Now, actually, I need to sort of explain a little bit more about DV24. So DV24, if I look at the end of DV24, let me just see the time slice I've got here. I'm going to move it back 1 week because they delete some cases at the end of the year. We don't quite know why they do that, but they delete a few cases, so it kind of messes things up with our data. So in terms of the number of people scheduled, the week before the last extract is actually the most accurate number of people scheduled. So last year, in order to issue in Africa 22,476 visas, they had to schedule in Africa 31,651 people, right? So roughly almost 32,000. In EU, to get 18,000, they eventually got about 18,000 visas issued, but that meant that they had to schedule 22,200. Now, these two numbers, Africa and EU, are kind of important. You can see that Asia went sort of ate, if you like, this extra number of visas that Africa didn't take. Africa should take, in DV25, should take about 23,000 visas. That should be the target. So Africa need to schedule about 31 to 32,000 people in order to get that. Let me ignore Asia for a minute, but EU actually issued about 18,000. That's about the same quota that they have in DV25. So in EU, we need to see about 22,000 people scheduled. Okay. And EU and Asia in particular, as well as Oceania and South America, can enjoy the benefit of Africa underfilling. And that looks very likely this year, because if we look at the data, the number of issued in Africa at the moment, with just a short time to go, is less than 12,000, right? So the chance of getting Africa to 23,000, 11,000 more, right, is very slim. In order to do that, they would have to schedule about 10,000 more people, which in Africa is a bit more than 5,000 cases. Remember that, because I'm going to come back to that in a minute. They would need to schedule about 5, maybe 5,500 cases, or about 10,000 people. In EU, they're almost at 11,000. They should get to 18,000. And so they need to schedule about 22,000 people, I said. They're only scheduled about 15,500 right now. There's a few here in transit status, and these will add. They'll actually more than double that 65. So we can reckon on about 150 people. So call that nearly 15,700. Just that's where they're at the moment, plus whatever they did yesterday. And I know they did send some more 2NLs yesterday on Saturday. but it's not, they're not doing enough, right? So and I pointed this out in a video probably a few weeks ago, and I showed you the spreadsheet I'm about to give you, or about to show you again. I showed you this, and I was hoping more of you would sort of like pay attention to this, because this is important. And you know, I don't think some of you are really thinking about this well enough. So if we look at what they scheduled in June of DV24, they scheduled 700, and this is EU. They scheduled 750 cases in EU. Last month's VB was too low, and because it was too low, I immediately complained, and I immediately pointed out that that would mean about 400 cases, roughly, in non-Uzbekistan that would get scheduled. It actually, you know, they got up to about 600 cases, and it was roughly what I assumed. But that is not a high enough number compared to even last year's June scheduling. Now and if you look at the numbers, what they scheduled in the last 3 months last year was just over 1,900, and quite well over 1,000, right? So that's what, 29, nearly 3,000 cases. In the last 3 months of last year, they scheduled 3,000 cases, and 3,000 cases in EU at a derivative rate of 2.5 is about 7,500 people, right? Now, in order to get that 1,000 case equivalent in for July, they had to make the number for EU something like 20 or 21,000. It had to be. And they went at 19,000. That's not enough. They can't yield enough cases from that number increase. It was a 1,500 increase, but that's 1,500 case numbers on the visa bulletin, and less than half of those cases are even real case numbers. Most of those cases at that level, the density rate means that less than half those numbers are real cases at all. So less than 750 cases in that 1,500 increase, right? We can look at the data, and we can see that EU is not heavily backlogged. So it wasn't like we're going to get a lot of cases from backlog. That's not a thing. And so they had to actually, they had, if they were going to get 1,000 interviews, they should have gone to at least 20 or probably 21, and they didn't do that, right? Which means that in the remaining 2 months, they have to do one of two things, right? They either are underfilling, and this is back to Stoic's question. They're either going to underfill in EU, they're not going to reach 18,000. That's one possibility, and it is a possibility, and I already said that that's perfectly legal, right? There's nothing wrong with that from their point of view. They job done, they did okay. Nobody's going to be told off, nobody's going to be punished if they only give away 16,000 or 17,000 visas. Nobody will care. If globally they only give 45, 46, 47,000 visas instead of using all of the 52,000 available, nobody will care. They won't be punished, right? I really want to get you to understand that point, right? So many of you assume that they're going to get there. And so when I do my mathematical predictions, which I published back in January, that assumes that they're going to operate in good faith to try and hit the quotas. And if they don't hit the quotas, or if they don't plan to hit the quotas, they're not held accountable. So it means that they could go under the numbers that I was predicting, right? Now, Stoics asked a sort of a two-part question. So the first part of the question is it more likely than it was a month ago or a year ago? Yes, because they had 3 remaining months. If we roll the clock back a month ago, they had 3 remaining months that had to be like almost 1,000 cases a month. They already screwed that up. They didn't make enough available, right? They've only got 2 months left. And in those 2 months, let's say we thought that they were going to do 1,200 interviews per month. That would mean quite a large bump in the VB for next month and the month after, the final month. That would require a big bump, right? A bump of probably no less than 4,000 case numbers per month, no less than that. It would require at least that. It would mean going to at least 27,000, I think. Yeah, about that. At least case number 27,000. Check me. I'm sort of slightly sort of shooting from the hip on that number. But if the density rate is less than 50%, and the response rate also has to be factored in, so not all of those cases will have responded, right? And if we've not got backlog, then that means you have to make about 4,000 cases per month current in order to yield comfortably a number in the 1,300 per month for those two months, right? That's one option, right? If they want to try and hit the number of cases, it just doesn't feel like they're doing that, because they wasted the opportunity to have a good month. They're probably only going to do another 500 or so. Maybe they'll go to 600. Maybe they get 600 2NLs. So they missed out by 150 cases, scheduled cases last month. They're going to miss out this month by about 4 or perhaps even 500 below what they should have done. They're not shooting for the number they should be shooting for. Is that deliberate? I don't know. Are they suddenly going to realize, holy crap, we better do something big in the last 2 months? We've got to use all the capacity from all of the embassies that have any capacity at all, right? Now, will they fix this next month? I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know what's in their heads. I don't know whether they understand what I can see, or whether they don't give a damn because they're going to underfill. I don't know. So at this point, there's no point asking me, are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? Are they going to, what is my number safe? There's no point asking me these questions at the moment, because I can't read their minds. I can say what they should have been doing, but that is on the assumption that they wanted to reach the quotas. And at the moment, they're not doing what they need to do in order to reach the quotas. So Stoic's question to me is absolutely on point. Yes, it has become more likely than it was a month ago that they're going to underfill. And it's more likely, I don't know about the year ago. I'm not quite sure I understand the point of that year ago thing, but it's become more likely that they will underfill. Yes, that's one possible scenario. The other possible scenario is, well, we'll come to that in a minute. So assuming, and his next question is this: assuming no underfilling, can we say the number of cases that needs to be current to meet the quota is lower this year compared to the last year? That's a bit of a tougher one. I kind of partially answered it in the last part of the question, right? When I said that what I think they would need to do is something like a 4,000 increase per month for the next 2 months. That's what they'd have to do. They'd have to go to something like 22.5, maybe 23,000 in the next VB as a minimum. They'd have to do that. And then the last month could be a bit of a Hail Mary, right? Maybe they go to 27, maybe they go to 30, maybe they go to 35, and let embassies do their thing and fill capacity where they can, right? That's the sort of thing that could happen. So I think I've kind of answered Stoic. I think I've kind of answered your second question. Philip then added on a question. Philip's another friend of the channel. He's constantly pulling data. So if he wants to ask a question, I'm going to take special time to answer that too. How much did the chances go down to have a last month's effort factor? He means Hail Mary, but he's using my terminology, and not in front of the kids, right? So Hail Mary. Hail Mary is what they did in a couple of the previous years, where they've made Africa current at the last visa bulletin, or they put EU current up to 50K. Complete nonsense in a way, because it's not mathematically necessary to make the region current to that level, right? It wasn't at the time they made EU current up to 50,000. It wasn't. And it didn't benefit very many people. It benefited a few hundred people in the world, because not all of the cases up to 50,000 could be scheduled. There was a natural capacity limit in the embassies, right? You can't just assume that these embassies can handle any capacity you throw at them. They have a capacity limit. And so even though they do a Hail Mary, it helps people in one of two categories. some people who are doing adjustment of status are now able to file their cases where they wouldn't normally have been able to file. And those people are very positively helped, because if you file your adjustment of status case in July, you're 99% certain to get that through by the end of September. People don't understand that adjustment of status cases for DV lottery go through a sort of a natural fast track, particularly towards the end of the year. And so although if you look up on the web, it will say adjustment of status takes 10 months or 12 months or whatever, that's not relevant for DV cases. So if they do a Hail Mary for EU or any region in the last month, it opens up the possibilities for people doing adjustment of status. That's only a small percentage. It's about 5% of the people that are winners go through adjustment of status. So it's not a very great number, but it's helpful for them. The other people that benefit from that last minute Hail Mary, and I'm looking at you, Philip, and I'm looking at you, Roberta, and I'm you know who I'm talking to, is people that have been wise enough to make sure they're at embassies where they're quiet embassies that seem to have elastic capacity. They seem to have elastic capacity because they are pretty small embassies where for them, they might take 2 or 3 or 5 cases a month on a typical month. And if they suddenly go nuts, and they take 20 cases in the last month, that's only 20 cases. Each interview takes 10 minutes, right? It's not the end of the world for them to say, yeah, we can take 20 cases. We normally our capacity is 5 or it's 10, but you got 20 cases for us, send them along. That's fine. And so if you're at that sort of little embassy that doesn't have a constraint in terms of the backlog, in terms of what they can possibly manage, then you actually have a bit of an advantage. So we saw some people going through, some of the smaller embassies like Vienna and so on. In DV24, I think it was, in DV24, at the last minute, if you look in EU, EU high case numbers that got scheduled, where they were 35, 38, 40,000 or whatever, or perhaps even up to the 50,000 number. If you look at those, it was some very small embassies that did that. I think Sofia was one, Vienna was one, there's a few like that, right? I'm deliberately not mentioning certain embassies. I don't want those, excuse me. I don't want those embassies to suddenly become hopeless because I said something. But if you're listening to my channel, and you should be looking at the data, and you can figure this stuff out for yourself. And if you're not doing that, well, I'm sorry. By now, if you're still expecting me to spoon feed you after all this time, I'm sorry. I'm starting to get frustrated with that laziness. So I'm not going to do that. So these last minute Hail Marys can be advantageous. And funnily enough, Philip said, how much did the chances go down to have a last month effort factor? I think the chances went up, Philip, not down. And the reason for that is, okay, on the one hand, they might be planning to underfill, and that would take it to your point that there shouldn't be a last minute Hail Mary. But that starts to make the government look bad if they're not perceived to do this best effort thing. And so when they do this last minute Hail Mary and the quota is still underfilled, they can say, well, we did everything we could do. We made the visa bulletin as high as we could imagine going. And it's not our fault if the people didn't get scheduled, right? And so I think the chances, so there's two possibilities. One is underfilling, and the other is they've got to push the last 2 months really hard. They've got to increase next month pretty decently, and then the last month will be, in my opinion, a Hail Mary has become more possible if that's what they want to do. If they want to try and issue as many visas as possible, then Hail Mary became more possible. If they want to underfill, then yeah, I take your point. Then maybe they're not going to bother, and they'll just the last 2 months will be sort of more organized, increases. We've yet to see. Now, all of that assumes that EU only has its own quota of 18,000, but Africa is also underfilling, right? And Africa, like if I show you this here, if I show you this here, it's also difficult for Africa to suddenly sort of adapt to getting a massive number of interviews. By the way, these are cases being interviewed, right? This is the number of 2NLs that were issued for each of the months in DV24, right? So Africa has a big capacity. It can take 1,800, even 1,900 cases in a month, which for them at 1.9 is nearly 4,000 people, right? They can do that in Africa. But even if they did that, even if they did a big number of cases, and again, they didn't increase the VB for Africa very much. They only increased it from 42.5 to 45,000. That's not a big enough increase for them to yield these sort of numbers. So we're not going to see, we saw 1,382 2NLs last month in DV25 at a 1.9 derivative rate, right? That's less than they did in June last year. And then they increased in July to 1,800. But again, with 2,500 increase on the VB, they're going to underfill again. They're going to undershoot the number of 2NLs, right? They're not doing enough 2NLs to get them to the 23,000 number. So Africa is going to underfill unless they do something like really pretty dramatic in the next two visa bulletins. Africa is going to underfill as well, right? And if Africa underfills, then its unused quota falls to Europe, who doesn't look like it's overfilling. They did have a pretty good month last month. This is EU, but they did 514, but that's against a very quiet June of last year, and it wasn't at their capacity that they've got in the system. So it's not like Asia is also filling. So I mean, the available visas for EU, going back to EU, the available visas for EU is actually more than 18,000. So we don't even need to think of the quota as being the constraint. The constraint now is capacity and the simple decision being made at the government, right? Do they underfill, or are they going to try and fill the regions that they can fill, which is they can fill Asia, they can fill EU, at least to quota. They can do that. They probably can't now fill Africa. I think that's a done deal. I think they've already lost that game. And if you look at this to see why, they just need too many cases to be scheduled. They need 5,000 cases at least to be scheduled, which is nearly 10,000 people. They need 10,000 people to be scheduled in Africa to even get close to the 23, and they're not there. And there's not enough cases in Ready or in 221G to solve this problem for them. So, so Africa is probably going to underfill. Asia, a little bit, Asia's a little bit of a different thing. I mean, Asia's probably doing pretty well, but if you look at, that was June of last year. If you look at the final numbers, Asia needs about 12,000 people being scheduled in order to yield, in that case, 9,700, which was over the number they should have yielded. And so, they probably need about 11,000 or so. Where are they at right now? They're at 7,100. That's people, not cases. They're not too bad. They could probably get there. They could get pretty close to the quota. And maybe they could go a little bit over the quota, particularly if they take some from Africa. But EU is struggling, right? And as I say, I know that there are people, even someone who you will all know his name, even someone like that came to me and said, Europe is overissued. And I'm like, yeah, it is, but like, you got to look forward, not backwards. It's overissued right now. It's issued more than in DV24, but they're not doing what they need to do for the last 4 months of the year in order to continue the pace. and the pace dramatically lifted up. So if we look at 24, in terms of cases, they scheduled nearly 9,000 cases, right, in the whole year. But 1/3 of those cases were scheduled in the last 3 months, right? 1/3 of all the cases, a bit more. So the last 3 months is supposed to be the busiest time of year, and last year it was, and this year they're screwing it up. so, so I don't know what they're thinking. They needed to look at this as a 4-month busy period. They already screwed up the first of those 4 months. Last month they did that. They screwed that up, and they made the problem worse. And then they had a chance to fix it this month, and they didn't. They actually made it worse again by not making the visa bulletin high enough. So what are they playing at? Do they understand? I don't know. The visa office changed hands, maybe they're not understanding what's going on, or maybe they are planning simply to underfill. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, so Roberto. Greetings from Milan Airport. I was flying this week, Milan, Roberto as well. I was in Florida this week. Had a great trip. Saw my brother after 2 or 3 years. That's been lovely. But I had a business trip. So, okay, let's start taking some of these questions. Let's see if I'm going to try and I'll scroll back up, but I don't know if I'm going to get through all these questions. Let's see. Yeah, please reassure us. I can't reassure you, for Tunis or anywhere else. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm not going to try and predict the final numbers any more than the conversation I've just given you. So if I see questions like this, I'm just going to say, I don't know. DV26, do you think it will reach 20K? I'm 20K in Asia. 20K in Asia. I don't know. That's a high case number, I would say, in Asia in DV26. However, we don't know how many selectees there are in DV26. We don't know the total number. We don't know by DV26. Where is it? Yeah, let me just check the numbers. We don't know how many selectees in total there are, and we've only got the poll in terms of the number ranges. Let me just show you the poll quickly, the poll results. So for those of you that haven't filled this out, please come here, dv26poll.zarthisius.xyz. Okay, you click there to fill out the poll. You can see the data in each of the regions. So if we look at AS region, so far we've got some people saying they've got numbers up to about 28, 29, but only one person, and then 6 people from 26 to 27. So I think the highest number that is, and actually we can look down here, total maximum is less than 30,000. So there's one person who reports a number of 29 up to, something like 29,000 something. It's above 28,000. And then there's 6 people who reported between 26 and 27. So your number at 20 is pretty high, but high meaning what? Because we don't know the number of selectees. It could be an under-selected year. It's not. I don't think it is, but it could be, right? So it seems like a high case number at 20K, but we don't know for sure. Let's just quickly show you the other regions while we're on this question. The other regions, we've got one guy at sort of 110 to 114, actually less than 112,000, but we've got several cases up to about 100 to 104. So I do think that the highest case number selected in Africa is probably going to be about 105 to 112,000, something in that range. I think that's fairly accurate. And so if you're at an Africa 70,000, that's possibly not as bad as last year at Africa 70,000, because the numbers were lower last year, right? So the highest case number is higher this year. Does that mean they increase the number of selectees? That's a possibility. Or is there a lower density rate? And that's also a possibility. Could it be the same number of selectees but a higher case number at the end? Yeah, that's how density rate works. And so without knowing the number of selectees, we don't really know what these ranges are like. If we look at EU, we can see 46. It's shaping up it's shaping up that the highest reported case is, and I'll show you down here. Maybe you can see this. Hang on a second. I'll show you down here. Zarth has put an extra bit of information in there to show you what that highest number reported is. So it's 48 to 49,000, but it's it's just under 50,000, right? So about 49,000. So again, we've got pretty high case numbers, higher than last year, but do we have a lower density rate and less selectees? We don't know. Okay. We'll have a look at Oceania. Oceania is normally very reliable to report numbers. It looks like their case numbers are lower this year, right? Now, it doesn't mean selectees are lower. That means that the case numbers we're seeing are lower. When are we going to know about selectee numbers? We'll see the country number per country numbers in either the VB that's published in July or the VB that's published in August, right? So we're going to see those numbers at that point. Okay, so that's the poll. Let me just put that up. Okay. So do we think, going back to the question, DV26, will it reach Asia 20K? I don't know. I don't think we're going to reach Asia 20K in DV25. So, given that the numbers are lower, it looks a bit more risky, but we don't really know. AF32K Morocco, is there any hope? Because in Morocco, they're so late. Yeah, they're backlogged in Morocco. They just took 50 interviews. Let me show you that. Let me show you something here. Where are you? I'm going to scroll over there. I'm going to move this. Philip kindly extracted the data. And this data is the number of 2NLs or the 2NLs since 5/11. So in other words, it's all of the 2NLs that have happened this week. There's been 1,372 2NLs sent. By region, you can see that Africa got 753. This is so far. This is not for the whole month. Asia is 345. EU is 226. OC 6 again. 6 is what they got last month too. Like, come on. That means Suva is slowing down. I'm not quite sure why Suva is slowing down, but South America 42. So, and in terms of embassies that have taken cases, you can see they're mainly in the A's, B's, and C's, meaning they've really only just started the 2NLs. There will be more 2NLs coming out this week for embassies that don't start with A, B, and C. But there may be some A, B, and C's in there as well. The alphabetical order is, you can kind of see it's sort of true, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's not a rule. It's not a law. It's just the way they tend to do it. So the A's, B's, and C's have already reported receiving cases, even though we've got a lot of cases still in transit where we don't know those cases where they've gone. But the A, B's, and C's are earliest to report, right? So CSB, Casablanca, got 50 cases for Africa. And Addis took 148. Pretty good number from Addis. Accra is noticeable by its absence so far. I haven't heard of any 2NLs going to Accra. Don't know what they're playing at. So, and then we can see a few in EU. BKK took a good number. ATA, BNK took a good number. And then there's 105 in transit, right? For that donut that runs that other channel, in case he's watching, in transit doesn't signify anything about what they're about to do. In transit is cases that have been sent already. The individuals that are waiting for their 2NLs in Europe, right, for these 105 in transit cases, the individuals already have that 2NL. Okay, you muppet. What's that guy's name? I can't remember his name. But it's a channel who talks about DV lottery, and he always gets things wrong. Consistently gets things wrong, and I've tried to correct him and he doesn't bloody listen. But last year at least he was saying that in transit cases indicates that work is going to continue and that more 2NLs will continue to come out, which is incorrect. He's a bloody idiot when he says that. I don't know why he won't listen. I've explained to him and he continues to say the same stupid thing. So, sorry, but he is an idiot. That's the way it works. Right, 993 cases in transit right now. It's quite a lot to actually be moved to embassies. Like I say, those people with those 2NLs already know they got the 2NL. By the way, there is a glitch in the 2NL system. So some people are receiving the email that says that they should go and check the ESC page, and in the ESC page they're not seeing the 2NL. It's not coming fast enough. It's sometimes taking a day or two to come out. We joke about the intern has to update that and so on. But SEAC data is updated faster for some reason. Shouldn't be like that really, but it does work like that. And so if you receive an email saying go check ESC page and it's not there, then yes, you can't see your date of interview yet, but relax, that date of interview is going to be in July. If you're receiving your 2NL now, that's in July. You don't need to know the freaking date in July yet. Okay, so stop panicking, stop wetting your knickers over silly shit, and just wait. Okay, and you will have the date and the 2NL with the dates and the time will be there. If you can't possibly control yourselves, then you can email KCC. But what they'll tell you is your interview is scheduled on this date at this embassy, but they don't tell you the time. And then you're going to be all panicky again because you won't know what time. Some of you actually have said to me, oh, I don't know if it's 7 o'clock in the morning or if it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't care. Go there at 6 o'clock in the morning and wait all day. This is a green card. It's a green card interview. It doesn't matter if you're inconvenienced. Like, don't worry about it. And in reality, you're going to have the exact time and the exact date, and you're going to have your 2NL prior to that time anyway. It just might be a bit delayed. Okay, so just hold your panties, and it'll be fine. Okay, and if you want to know, by the way, where your embassy has where your 2NL has been sent, you can check the SEAC data yourself. The data that comes out of Zarthisius' site is also available if you go check your own case number on the case status thing. So you can do that. Okay, so that was a big diversion of time for one question. So let me get back and answer some quick questions. Can we say Nairobi Embassy has stopped completely scheduling DV? Just an opinion. No, we can't say that. How can we say that? You're asking me to say something with 3 months of scheduling left, and you're asking me to make a frankly what would be a very unwise, unwarranted thing to say, right? So you can say it, but I'm certainly not going to say it. And actually, there is some sort of background evidence, kind of, that says Nairobi might actually be about to take cases. So no, you can't say that, Evans. You have to be a bit more wise than that. I understand some of you prefer to be on the negative side. I get that. Negative is sometimes realistic. But I'm not ready to write off Nairobi, and nor should you be. Facial DZ, hope you're doing good. What do you think about 25 AF 50K, 58K now? You have to wait and see. Any changes to 2NL 26K in Casablanca Embassy? The performance of CSB is so slow. Yeah, I just talked about it. Do you expect a big jump of the following feasibility in Africa? Yeah, I'm expecting between this underfilling question and the big jump, right? They're the two possibilities: underfilling or a big jump. Now, I think what we'll get a big jump because the underfilling is a reality. It's going to happen. It's going to happen in Africa. But I think that they would rather have, I think the government would rather have underfilling where they have done what they could have done by having a bigger number. That's what I think they'll do. And I think that will benefit a few people. And there's some people in particular that I want that to benefit. But yeah, if you really ask me what I think is going to happen, somebody asked me the other day, for EU, what number would shock you if it didn't get to that number? And for EU, for example, I said 25,000. If the number ends up less than 25,000, I will be absolutely shocked. Because what it means is that it will be underfilled, and it will be deliberately underfilled. And that, I think, is two things that is, pretty bad. On the other hand, if they have the final visa bulletin is a high number, and it's underfilled, then they can say, yeah, it's underfilled, but it's not our fault. That's what the government can say. We made people current. It's not our fault if they didn't get scheduled, right? That, I think, is probably the more likely scenario of the two. And that's more in keeping with what they've been doing for several years now in terms of keeping on pushing, particularly Africa region. They've really been pushing Africa region in many ways. They've made Africa current when it shouldn't be current. They've increased the selectees for Africa when they've reduced the selectee numbers for every other region. They keep doing things to try and push Africa to reach its quota, and it doesn't. And so their reaction is just to keep on increasing selectee numbers, which I think is what they've done again. 26 Asia, DV case number 15. Can it be safe? I'm not going to talk about that because we don't have the selectee numbers. Again, we have to know the selectee numbers before we've got any conversation about, are you safe? Are you not safe? Please, is there any information about Freetown Embassy regarding bulletin? I don't get any information from any embassies directly. There is no embassy that's secretly emailing me or phoning me behind the scenes saying, hey, Simon, here's what we're doing. It doesn't happen. So I don't have any information that I would consider reliable from any embassy. Okay. The only information I get is information I hear from people, and I have to cut through a bunch of bullshit that people just make up and other stories that sound somewhat credible. And so, for example, I talked about Nairobi earlier, and that's because I've heard some credible reports with some supporting evidence that talked about how Nairobi Embassy has been communicating with people over the last 2 or 3 months. The communication has changed from a pretty hardline position, like we're too busy, and we're focusing on what's more highest priority, like IR cases, to a slightly softer position. And it seemed to indicate that Nairobi was getting close to restarting. And if they restart, by the way, they can be very impactful on the numbers because they can schedule a lot of cases, right? Delido, hope you're well. Thank you. I am well. Thank you for asking. Amira, my case number is 58K in Algeria. The last VB was 44. I guess, do you think I should change the country for visa appointment, or do I have a little chance? Okay, so at this point of the game, I've shown a number of times how you can look at your own embassy for whether it's backlogged or not. And I really believe all of you that that want to know about your cases, and all of you that are worrying, can do the very simple task that Zarthisius has made this. He's made it extremely simple for you to go and compare your embassy to other embassies, to see which embassies are backlogged, to understand how, what's the highest number they can get to. He's made it really easy, guys. And I've produced at least a couple of videos where I've demonstrated that technique. So it really is now time for you to sort of do that yourselves, okay? And I hope you will take that on board, okay? 16K, year 26 from Asia, Afghanistan. Any chance for an interview? It's way too early to we're not even at 16K for DV25, and you're asking me for 16K for DV26. Okay, it's going to be a year before your number. You need to just calm down and be patient. Okay. How you doing? We've been waiting for you since the last VB. Do you still believe that EU 24,000 is safe for AOS even after seeing 90K in July? I covered that. I would be absolutely shocked and amazed if the number is anything less than 25,000 for EU. Absolutely shocked. Is it possible? Yes, but it would be a complete shock. 26.5K Warsaw Embassy. If let's say cutoff for August increased to 25K, should I change my embassy to a less busy one like Hong Kong? Now, this is the scenario for many of you at embassies which are not the type I described earlier, where the embassies I was describing earlier were small embassies that don't take many cases month to month, and therefore can increase their capacity in one given month, 2 given months quite dramatically. And they will keep up with the visa bulletin number almost no matter how high that number goes. Okay. Let me show you. Let me show you what happened. Maybe I should sort of show you a couple of things here. Right. Let me go to. Okay, I'm not going to get through very many questions today, but what I am going to do is maybe educate you a little bit better. So this is going to be worthwhile. If we go back to what am I showing? Oh man, I'm getting all over the place here. That one, right? Where am I? I'm there. Yes, I'm showing that. Good. Okay, so if you go in and you go to we'll go to the 24 data, and you bring down the last file, right? I've done this, I don't know how many times. You should, yeah, 9 times. So I'm then going to open that file, right? And you're going to do exactly the same thing if you want to have a look at this. And you want to know what happened. So if I show you visually, first of all, what I'm about to show you with numbers, if we switch to the EU region, and this is the same for any region. Don't get on my case because I'm talking about EU, but it's the same for any region. Now, EU in the last user bulletin of DV24 went current to 50,000, right? But you can almost not see, or maybe you can see, I'm hoping you can see, but there's a massive number of cases that were actual real cases in that number range. But from, let's say, about 34,000 to 50,000, there were very, very few cases scheduled, right? And that's because of an embassy capacity limitation on some of those bigger embassies. They were not able to take those big numbers, right? And Warsaw would have been one of those, right? So if we look at the data and we bring up the 2024 data, is this the right one? Yes, it is, I think. Okay, this is the file I just brought down. You can all do the same thing I'm doing here. There's nothing fancy or special about what I'm doing. You can all do the same thing. And if you don't know how to do this, then find someone who does, right? So I want to focus on EU. So that's the first thing I'm going to turn off. I'm going to turn off all the other regions except for EU, right? I've only got EU. I'm then going to go into the status column. I'm going to turn off the nones, which are holes, and I'm going to turn off MVC. So in other words, I want to see scheduled cases in EU, right? I'm then going to scroll down to the bottom, and I'm going to show you the highest number scheduled was 49,711. So someone benefited from that 50K being current, right? And it was someone in BLG, and that's Bulgaria, right? I think. No, Sofia is whatever. Anyway, so BLG was good. VNN was there. Sofia was there. SOF, BRS, and so on, right? You can see, and then PRI. What's PRI? I can't remember what PRI is. Anyway, you can see what these are on Zarthisius's page. I mean, he's got, honestly, this used to be hard. Zarthisius has made this really difficult. Some of you guys don't understand what an amazing guy, he really is. Oh, Kosovo and BLG. Let me just see. Belgrade, Serbia. Okay, so he's made all this so easy for you. He's done everything you've got no complaints, you guys. He's made so much data available for you. It's just up to you to be on the ball. But if we look at the number of cases, therefore, and I'll say 34,000 or 35,000. So the number of cases between 35,000 and 50,000 that actually got an interview that benefited from the case numbers being current up to 50,000. 133 cases got scheduled between 35,000 and 50,000. There were many, many more cases that didn't get scheduled, right? This is what I mean. And I was telling people last year that the final VB should be something like, I think I said 33,000 was my highest number, and it went to 50,000. It made me look a bit foolish, let's say. But it was kind of pointless, right? It was pointless except for those 133 people, 133 cases, which is probably about 300 people, maybe at most. And it was very useful for adjustment of status. So not everyone will agree that it was pointless. That's what a Hail Mary is, okay? It's going to benefit a few people in a few embassies, but it's not going to benefit everybody in every embassy. And you can see that with other embassies, as we go down here, Let's look at some of the other ones. BKK is a big one, right? So BKK got up to, what's the highest? And you can go in there and you can say, well, what was the highest that my consulate did, right? If you're looking for Warsaw, for example, what was the highest one that Warsaw did? 2967. Okay. So there were no cases in Warsaw that got to the 50,000 number, didn't even get to 30,000. So, back to your question, Zays, which is what you're asking. Do you have more of a problem in Warsaw than you would do in somewhere like Hong Kong? Yeah, you do, right? So if you've got time to change and you have the ability to change, then yeah, you're going to increase your chance. Now, if they did make the final VB current, to your number 26.5k, there's a big risk that you wouldn't get interviewed at Warsaw compared to some of the other embassies, right? I'm making it clear, aren't I? I hope I'm making it clear. Is there any news from DV Lottery 26? What's the highest case number in Africa? It looks like about 105, maybe 110. EU 90, I don't know why you're telling me your specific case number. Please, is there a chance that I will exceed in DV Lottery one day because I failed this year? It's a random draw. The only thing you can do is make sure that your entry every year has a good photo and you fill in the entry every year. But if you've got a 1 in 100 chance of selection, you may never get selected. That's the reality of it. Doesn't mean you're necessarily doing something wrong. It's just the average chance, right? Greetings, everyone. Any chances for a second draw in December? For us to, well, it wouldn't be in December. For us to know about a second draw for DV26, we need to know the selectee numbers. The indications are that this is another over-selected year. And in that case, there will be no second draw. But we don't know that for a fact until probably July or August of this year. Okay. Do I have chances with 24.5k in EU? Yes, you do. There's no hope for interviews 65k F25. I don't agree. There might be. OC 19,000. I don't think you've got an OC 19,000 number. You might be 1900. What are the chances you think? Well, I don't know, because you're not telling me the year for a start. So an angel's now going to be killed. Is there any hope 50 AF55k next to visa bulletin company coming? Yes. AF55k is another sort of number that I would be shocked if that number didn't go current. So it's at 45,000 now. I will be shocked if it doesn't grow at least 10,000 in the next visa bulletin. And I won't be at all surprised if higher numbers than that go current. I wouldn't be at all surprised. Okay. I did say my predictions for Africa originally mathematically had the number around about 60k roughly. But I didn't see any danger at all below 55k. So I'm kind of in the right range, but I don't really know what the government's going to do to Africa. And I think that Hail Mary thing is probably becoming more and more likely. That's my personal opinion. How are you doing, sir? My case number 41k from Morocco. Any hopes? A lot of risk, obviously, a lot of risk. You're not current yet. Morocco is current to, I think, 34k or 34.5. So, maybe you'll get current, but even if you get current, if you're in Casablanca, you've got challenges. So yeah, to be honest with you, you're in risk, right? As to, is there any hope? Well, there's always hope. You always can hope until the last moment, right? Dear Simon, I was told that anything below AS15k is safe. It doesn't look like it. I'm in 13k. Yeah. What you were told before is pretty accurate. But again, if they decide to underfill, I don't know anything about that, right? When can I expect an interview at AS1800's case number? Please predict Mumbai and India. Probably this year. I guess even though you're not telling me, and I should be killing an angel right now. I'm going to assume you mean it's DV26, but please do give you a year. Put 2026 AS18XX. So 1800, you've got pretty good chance of being interviewed in 2025, which means in October, November, December, right? It's really almost a silly question, to be honest. Is there a possibility for a Hail Mary in July? Yes. in EU. Yes, that's what happened last year. Could they do it again? Yes. I am from Erevan. My case number is Erevan. Is that how it's spelled? Not Yerevan? That's interesting. EU 30,500. What are my chances? You need a Hail Mary. That's what you need. And then you need an extraordinary performance from Yerevan if you're there. I mean, you've got risk two ways, really. You're significantly at risk, but you have to wait and see. Warsaw, we talked about. Dale Roberts, hello. Dale spoke before, I believe. I'm worried about making it for the latest update, having AF65K, I remember, for AOS DV25. Do you think Africa can go current in the last bulletin? Maybe it'll go current. It has several years earlier, each of the years earlier. It might go current. That's a possibility. Even if it doesn't go current, a Hail Mary number would probably reach you. So yeah, you have to see, Dale. And you're one of the people, because you're doing AOS, you're one of the people that would benefit from that. So good luck. Fingers crossed. Make sure you're ready, Dale. Make sure you're ready. Let's go back to this. Make sure you're ready to submit your package in mid-July. Don't mess that up. Make sure you're ready, please. Okay. Yeah. Hello, sir. I have a question. My brother won DV26, but the case number appear only for him, not his wife. So can he fill the DS260 for both of them? Yeah. Look, that's the way it works. You get one case. The winner gets a case and then includes the derivatives, right? So that includes the spouse and it includes the kids and so on. And you fill in a DS260 for yourself if you're the winner. Thank you, hon. And for each of the derivatives, the spouse, the kids, and so on. Anyone that wants to emigrate. Okay, so you fill them all in. Okay. In your opinion, until where will become interview until September from Asia this year? I don't know what that means. From where will become interview? I don't know. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you're trying to say. Excuse me, do you know why this year processed slower than other years? Like Asia is stuck 3,000 almost 2 months. 3,000. Will it happen again for DV26? Again, I hope you've been watching from the beginning. I've explained that it's actually not slow. DV25 on issuances is ahead of previous years. Okay. But what they're doing is right now they're screwing up the end of the year. What will happen in DV26? There's plenty of time for us to talk about that. You don't need to know that right now. I understand that you want to know that right now, but just wait and see, okay? Hello, sir. Between which months should one take a DV photo? Your photo that you submit in the DV lottery process is supposed to be less than 6 months old when you submit it. It's going to be in October, so you can start taking your photos now, but I would suggest you wait a little bit until you understand what the rules are and so on. Case number is AF, what is it, AF 10,000. I haven't got an interview appointment. Can you advise me? I can, Emma, but I can advise you, but you're not giving me any information. You're not telling me your embassy. You're not telling me whether you submitted your DS260 or whether it's been processed. So what I suggest you do is get your act together, get yourself into a position where you can write a question with some detail that I need in order to answer your question, and then post that at BritSimonSays.com. All right, Emma, help me help you. I can't read your mind over the internet. All right, even if you were sitting here, to be honest, I still can't read your mind. So you have to give me a bit more information. And when you say, can you advise me? I mean, advise you what? I advise you to drink lots of water and do yoga. Like, advise you what? Give me a clue about what your question is, or information that provides the background, right? What do you think for EU 28,400? I've just noticed, by the way, I think I'm speaking with a bit more of a British accent this week because I've just spent a little bit of time. I only spent a few hours with him, but with my brother. And I think it's rubbed off on me. I don't know. What do you think for EU 28,400 and 26,700? Will there be a problem with jeans? With jeans? What is the forecast for the last two bulletins? Is there a possibility currently this year, like in 2007, 2006, 2002? Oh my God, Yusuf, you've been looking back all those years. How many times have you heard me to say, don't bother comparing to previous years? Not only did you ignore that, you went back to 23 years. You looked at 2002, thinking that's got anything to do with now. What the hell are you smoking, dude? Uh, oh. Now, as opposed to your other questions, is there a problem with jeans? What do you mean? Is there a problem with jeans? Americans wear jeans. What would be the problem with jeans? You don't tell me your year, so I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Don't know what to say. I'm like dumping your question because I don't know what to say to you. After the latest bulletin, my case number AF66K. Hi, Simon. Good afternoon. Trusting you're doing great. I am. Thank you. I'm just looking for well-formed questions, though, and I'm not seeing very many. We are a family of 4. Case number 21400. Paris Embassy. We are very worried. Are we right? This is what I've got all morning. What is going on? Okay, let me try and read your mind. Hang on, Stefan. Reading a mind. Can you hear me? You're a family of 4. Okay, you say you're a case number 21400. You're Paris Embassy, but you don't tell me which year. I'm going to assume. I think I've heard from you before. I think you're probably a DV25, but I should kill 2 angels over this, really, because you didn't put your EU in there. But I'm going to assume you're EU because you're saying you're in Paris, and your name is Stefan, you see, I'm having to interpret all this information, right? Which is just, kind of a pain in the ass, to be honest with you. But you're a family of 4, makes no difference to me. I don't care if you're a family of 44. That makes no difference to whether you're going to get an interview or not. You're at Paris Embassy. You're very worried. Are we right? Are you right for what? To be worried? Well, yes and no. You're going to get current, right? That's pretty much a certainty. You're going to get current. The question is, will Paris be able to schedule you? You need to go look at the data to see whether they can schedule you. Okay. What do I think of Ankara Embassy? I'm very frustrated with that embassy. Do you think they will reach 15K plus cases until the end of September? Probably not. But we have to see. I'm case number 55K with my interview in Kigali. Do I have a chance to be scheduled? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I still hope. It's the same questions all over. AS 1800 go through. Dudes, I need the year. I can't answer. There's so many dead angels out in front of my office right now. They keep dropping like flies. I need the year. Emma phones, you seem to be completely safe. Just get your education papers ready. Those take time in my country. I don't know about yours. Yeah, okay. I think probably, okay, whatever. I'll try and be nice. Be nice. Be nice, Simon. I have this. You're probably not going to be able to read this. I don't know if that's back to front, but I have this little thing that tells me to be nice. And really, I chew this thing after live questions where, you're tempting me to not be nice. But anyway, I'm 66.4K, Algeria 25. Okay, so I got a clue. Should I give up after the latest bulletin? I often get these questions formed in that way. Should I give up? Right? There's 2 visa bulletins to go, and things. Should I give up? If I said to you, give up, would you actually give up? Would you never check the numbers again? Is that what you'd do? I don't think this question's really a true thing, you say. I don't think you will give up, no matter what you're saying. I think you're just sort of being negative with yourself, and there's no advantage to that. It's great to be realistic. I love realistic people, but negativity doesn't help. Yes, you've got a high risk. You're in Algeria. Algeria's got an accept number, but the accept number is nearly the same as Africa. And it's possible that could go current, and maybe you could engineer yourself getting an interview, right? But you have to wait and see, right? There's no point in you giving up, because I know you're not going to give up. You're still going to check, right? This whole process is such a mind challenge. I totally understand. I went through it myself. It is a challenge to your mind. It's a challenge to your, your mental health, in all honesty, is a very difficult process. And I know that my method of answering questions sometimes doesn't really always make sense to people, but I do try and shake you up to try and get you to understand the information I'm giving you, so that you can make good answers for yourselves, really, to be honest with you. Do you think tomorrow 19th, do you think Kenyan embassy will schedule? I don't know. That's an interesting question to ask me. Mukan TV, I'm selected, but on my entry, I made a mistake on count of eligibility. What should I do? Must apply for a visa or just leave it like that? How can I answer that question, Mukan TV? How can I answer? I don't know what the mistake you made on the count of eligibility. What does that even mean? What count of it? Oh, country of eligibility. What mistake did you make on the country of eligibility? How can I possibly answer if you don't give me the information? Am I supposed to read your mind? There are some mistakes in country of eligibility. Let me answer it this way. There are some mistakes in country of eligibility that can be forgiven. Okay. There are also two exceptions to the country of eligibility. Let me quickly run through it. If you're in Africa and you're born in, let's say, Kenya, but you say you were born in South Africa, or you say you were chargeable to South Africa for whatever reason. Actually, it's a bad choice of countries. Let me say you're in. Let me say you should have been applying from South Africa, but for whatever reason you applied from Kenya, right? If that was the way around, you gain no advantage through selecting South Africa. Sorry, through selecting Kenya. If you did that the other way around, you might have gained an advantage. If you were actually eligible in Kenya, but you chose South Africa, then you may have given yourself an advantage because Kenya could be limited, whereas South Africa is not limited. And so that might be a bad way around. But if it was the other way around, you were supposed to say you were in South Africa, but you actually said you were chargeable to Kenya, that mistake could be forgiven because it's within the same region and you gained no advantage. If, on the other hand, let's switch this to a little bit easier situation. Let's say you were actually born in Nepal, right? But you chose Nauru in Oceania, and you got no reason to choose Nauru in Oceania. Then that means that not only do you not have an Asia number limited by Nepal, but you now have an OC number. In that case, 100% of the time, you're going to be disqualified, right? Where your mistake crosses into another region, you're going to be disqualified unless you have one of the excuses or explanations or exceptions that lets you do that. And the only two exceptions are this. One is because you were married to someone from the Oceania region on the island of Nauru, and that's why you chose Nauru instead of Nepal. Nauru, unfortunately, is also one mouse roll away, I think, from Nepal. It's like very close. And so there are people from Nepal every year that make that mistake and they choose Nauru. And there are other combinations which I know to be very close. And it's because of this. You go through, if you can see that, you go through and you roll that wheel one time more. You touch that wheel and it moves the country that you selected. You selected Nepal and then you touch that wheel. And it messes up your application. And so if you are married to someone from that other region, then you can charge that other region. If you can prove that your parents, if you chose Nauru in this case, if you can prove that you were only in Nauru temporarily, and that actually, that's why. Well, I'm sort of mixing my cases here, but if you were born in a country where your parents were only there temporarily, and actually they're from other countries, both of them from not from the country where you were born, you could prove, you could prove that because you were there temporarily, you're allowed to charge to one of your parents' countries, either of their countries. that can be very valuable if the country of your birth is ineligible. Like let's say you were born in China, but you can prove with evidence that your parents were only in China temporarily and neither one of them was born in China. Then you can say, yep, that's why even though I'm born in China, I'm going to choose, France because my parents are both from France, right? That's the other possibility. Other than that, you're going to get thrown out. You're going to get disqualified at the interview. And they won't disqualify you before, by the way. They'll do it at the interview, meaning you'll pay all the fees, you'll lose all the fees, and then they'll tell you you're disqualified. It's kind of cruel, but there's a reason for it. Okay. AF 12,000. Is there any chance to get interviews soon this year, Nairobi Embassy? Maybe. We'll have to see how Nairobi does. I think you've probably got a good chance. EU case 30,456. That success awaits me. DB25. I don't know. I think I've talked about EU enough. I just had my first lottery and I wasn't selected in Hungary. Should I keep trying and what are my chances? Yes, you should keep trying, Green Tech. Your chances are about 1 in 100 years. So it's not a plan, you may as well enter. It's free, right? Case number is AF45. I currently live in France, but recently lost my residence permit. I'm still here for now. Should I consider choosing the Algiers embassy? You don't want to. It's kind of a difficult one. There's the immigration guy and me, and but there's other considerations here. Generally speaking, it's not a good thing to abuse one country's immigration laws by overstaying and then just like not leaving when you're supposed to leave, and then expect the USA to give you rewards through their immigration laws when you don't give a damn about countries' immigration laws, right? So generally speaking, you should get the heck out of wherever you are, right? That's my personal opinion. You should not be going around the world disrespecting other countries' immigration laws. If you've lost your residence permit, then you're supposed to leave, I presume, and you should have left. Depending on, well, it's 45,000. So your number is about to get current, right? The DV lottery guy in me says, okay, I understand why you would maybe wait around for another month and try and get the interview that way. But, it's up to you. I'm not condoning your behavior, though. I don't think it's the right thing to do, but there you go. Okay. Let's take a few more questions. Oh, I've already gone an hour and 20. I spoke for a long time. Let me see if I can find some good questions here. They're all the same sort of questions. It's, if you submitted on 1st of June, should I ask KCC if my DS260 is processed? There's no harm in you asking. I think KCC's response times have increased a little bit just recently because of the DV26 selectees coming in. But yeah, you can ask them. There's no harm. I'm trying to prove my 12-year education, but no response from KCC yet. I'm trying to prove my 12-year education. What should I do? I'm worried it affects my chance. I don't know. I don't understand why you've put that combination. Why are you trying to prove your 12-year education? You don't prove that to KCC. Of course, they're not going to respond to you about that. Is that what you're trying to do? You've been sending documentation to them to try and prove your 12-year education. They don't give a damn. They are not able to adjudicate your case. You can send them all the education documents in the world, and it's not going to make any difference. They don't adjudicate your case, so they don't care about your education documents. Your one chance to prove your education is at the interview. So wait and see if you get interviewed. You should have done. I'm not sure why you're not getting interviewed, but that's the bigger question you should be thinking about. Why can't embassies make their interview projections public, like say for the next 3 months, so everyone can be certain about their fate? What a lovely idea. Lovely but naive. They don't make their projections. You're talking about their capacity projections, right? They don't make them public because they believe it's none of our business. they don't feel any sense of accountability to us. We do not have a right to these interviews, these visas, and so on. We don't have rights in this process. And so they have no measure of accountability to us in law, and they certainly don't feel like they do, right? Some embassies, more than others, do things like YouTube podcasts and, you know, all those sort of things. Some of them trying to communicate better, some of them trying to give a little bit more information, but none of them, as far as I am aware, are publishing information like, hey, good news, we're doing, we normally only take 30 interviews each month, but we're going to try and do 60 next month. They don't want to hold themselves to that. They don't want to make themselves accountable to the public, for the public to then, you know, send them horrible emails saying 60 is not enough, you need to do 90. Even though you normally only do 30. They're not going to put themselves in that position. Why would they? They got no need to. They got no accountability. You've got no rights. They don't give a damn what you think. So it's a lovely idea, but it's very naive. Any idea what's going on in the UK? Haven't seen any selectees at all from the past 2 years. Okay, let me talk about this. Actually, let me see if he's replied. I've spoken to a lawyer that you all know and love. And how can we prove, other than visa stats? No, yeah. Debating on whether to file in Kentucky. Okay. Oh, wow. That's actually not bad. Okay, so Curtis, if you're listening. Okay, I'm going to float this now. Right, this will be the last thing I talk about. Okay, what I've done is I've discussed with Curtis Morrison, because he has taken cases in the past that are kind of like this. Let's talk about the UK for a second. Let's talk about my friend here. Who's this? Ryan Picken. So first answer, haven't seen any selectees at all from the past 2 years. You're correct. I don't believe there are any from the last 2 years. So in DV25, I was kind of ambivalent in the beginning about why I was not seeing any numbers and not seeing any selectees. And then I got a couple of people that said, hey, I'm a selectee from the UK. And I kind of relaxed about it, because when they published the visa bulletin last year in August for the number of selectees, it showed that the Great Britain had not been had not had any selectees at all. And that was kind of frustrating to me, because I assumed that what it meant was they had forgotten to include Great Britain on the visa bulletin announcement. Because even if Great Britain got 0, it should have been there with 0 selectees, right? And I would have sort of accepted that if they'd have said that, but they actually just left Great Britain off of DV25 selectee numbers by country. And they announced 131,060 selectees. So they've said, and they have told people after that, that that is the correct answer, that there were no GB selectees in Great Britain. Now, that's got to be bullshit. My own daughter applied for the green card last year, and I know there were many, many more people that applied for the green card lottery last year, and in DV26. So far, despite me asking, I know of at least 200 to 300 people that have applied for DV26 and didn't get selected. Now, the chance of selection is something like 1 in 100. So I can see 100 or maybe 200 people, and just by chance there's no selectee in that group of entries. But I actually think the number of entries must have been in the thousands for GB, and we had no selectees in DV25, and I think none in DV26. We'll see the official numbers in August. So I've started a conversation with Curtis Morrison, who is a lawyer that has worked on big DV cases before. And the reason I've really continued this conversation with Curtis, even though Curtis and I have had a bit of a somewhat difficult relationship at times, we're both people who are passionate and tend to argue, etc. And so it's been a little bit difficult at times. But I knew that Curtis would find a creative way of onboarding a number of people and could possibly keep the cost down. So I asked him if we could do a limited focus lawsuit where he's basically just challenging the fact that there are no selectees in DV25 and DV26 that we can find. Now, we know that that's the case in DV25, so that's pretty obvious to challenge, and we can make that assumption and say to the government, now prove that you have got some selectees in DV25, because we can get 200 or 300 people very quickly to give me all the details. I could probably get all of their details, because I think people would trust me to give me all of their details to gather at least 200 or 300 examples of people that entered the DV lottery, and I would need their names and probably their confirmation number and so on. I would need some information, right? But there's no harm in giving me the confirmation number, for Christ's sake, because you've already checked, you were told you're not selected. There's no point in being secretive about that, right? So I could publish an online form and get 200 or 300 people to fill that out, because I know there are a bunch of people that have entered one of those 2 years or both of those years and didn't get selected, right? So I can gather that. And Curtis is suggesting a number now, which sounds a reasonable number, where if there were enough people that were prepared to pay the cost, then we could have a lawsuit that would find out that answer, and maybe it would come in time to restore some chances for DV25 folks, maybe, although that's doubtful, and I have to be clear about that. I don't think there's enough time to actually get this fixed for DV25 folks, but there is enough time to get this fixed for DV26. And it doesn't have to mean a redraw in any of the other countries or regions, etc. I believe it can be done without a redraw, and this is what I've said to Curtis. And I'm hoping that we can make that happen, right? So it might be that we say, look, if we can get enough people, and I don't know, I'll have to work out the numbers, but if we got enough people, it might take like 100 people paying, maybe $60 or $70 a piece, maybe $100 a piece, something like that. I'm just thinking how much money I'm prepared to throw at it. I'm prepared to throw a couple of thousand at it just because I want to know, but I couldn't afford I couldn't justify to myself and to my family spending the whole cost. So I would need this partially supported by members of the public that had a vested interest. The bad thing is, I'm going to be saying to people, look, if you're prepared to give, I don't know, $70, $100 or something like that, then all that will do is at least you'll know whether you had a fair chance or not. And maybe some of you, one or two of you, that paid the money might actually be lucky enough to be selectees. But in general, what you're doing is you're paying the money to know, and then hopefully we can restore the chances of everybody that was in GB, and so that other people will benefit from your money, right? That's a hard thing to ask someone to pay money for, right? When you know that what you're asking them to pay for, even though it's only $100 or something, it's not a lot of money. Even though it's a small amount of money, it's still money that someone's going to throw down the pan for a 100-to-1 shot that maybe they were selected and and they got a chance, right? But I want to know, and I think many of you want to know, were you treated fairly or not, right? And so I'm going to try and put that together, I think, with Curtis. He's come back with a couple of points and a cost, and I'm going to verify the cost with him and see if there's any other additional costs that might come. And then that will give me a number of people that would have to sort of sign up for that. So I could cover some of the cost, and that they, the public could cover some of the cost, and so on. And we could say, go ahead and file that lawsuit. It would not be, though, when Curtis normally does these lawsuits, he then offers extraordinary ongoing support for various aspects. And I've made very clear to him that this lawsuit would be none of that help. For him to do this at a low cost, he can't get involved in helping people filling out DS-260s and getting them interviews and being their lawyer of record for every other action in this case. He just can't afford to expose himself that way to that level of work and keep the cost low. And so that's why I asked him to craft something that limits his exposure to ongoing work. So what he would do is he would file a lawsuit that would say to the government, prove to us that you gave everybody a good chance, a fair chance in DV25. Give us the number of people that were selected for DV25 and 26. Confirm if it's 0. And then tell us how many people entered from GB in 25 and 26. And then justify why none of those were chosen. And if there's more than 300 entries, and I know there are, if there's more than 300 entries, they can't justify that. So what it means is they fucked up. and if they did F it up, then they should put that right, and they should restore the rights of those DV winners, and they should do that by saying, okay, we got 10,000 entries. We'll select the number of winners from those 10,000 entries, and we need to give those people the same chance that they would have had. That means giving them the same number ranges that they would have had randomly, right? And they'd have to use the wholes. I think they would either have to use the whole numbers to be able to disperse the winners throughout the number range. So some of them would have low case numbers, and some of them would have medium case numbers, and some of them would have high case numbers. Or it might be that they actually are the wholes, and that they were made into wholes during the draw process, in which case they've already got numbers, they just need to be revealed, right? And they could be contacted and their rights could be restored. And these are people that probably wouldn't even know anything about it. So we would have to force the government to email each of those winners and say, hey, you might want to go and check the ESC page because you might be a winner. And some of them will get that email completely out of the blue, and they'll probably ignore it because they won't know anything about this conversation, right? So that's rushing through the process, but let me set this up with Curtis. I think I want to do this, and I think there are enough people out there that would see that it's the right thing to do. And as long as we can do it in a way that doesn't affect anybody else that's already a winner, then I'd be happy to do that. What I don't want to happen is a redraw in the way that happened in DV 2012, but because that was a bunch of people were selected at the beginning, and then they threw those results away and did a redraw. That would not be fair. That would not be the right way to approach this. But this isn't the same level of problem as it was in DV 2012. It's very different, and I'll explain that more in another video. And so that's why I think this particular problem can be solved in a localized way just for DV winners or DV's entries for GB. Okay, so that's what I'm going to try and do, 25 and 26. Okay, I've gone on long enough, and it's time to shut this live session down. But thanks for everyone who's listened in today. I'm sorry I didn't get through many questions, but I think I've discussed some important topics. And if you do have questions that you need answered that aren't questions like I'm AF 65K, do I have a chance? If you got sort of actual technical questions that you need actual answers to, not just predictions, and you're not just looking for reassurance and predictions from me, then go ahead and ask those questions on BritSimonSays.com. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you like this video. By the way, I don't get many thumbs up. I'd like some more. And please subscribe to my channel. And if you're from the GB and you entered DV25 or DV26, please do look out over the next few days, and I'll be announcing next steps for a lawsuit about this. And I'll be contacting also an agency in Germany who I know has about 100, I think he said 112, but about 100 entries that they made for GB people. So I'll be contacting him and trying to get some involvement of him as well. That's a good point. Maybe he'll do something. Actually, that might be nice. That might be a nice thing. I'll contact him, see what he says. Maybe you can share some of the cost with me. All right. Thanks everybody for your time this morning. I hope you've had some answers that help you. And as I say, go ahead and ask those questions on BritSimonSays.com if I didn't get to you. All right, everyone. Thanks. Have a good Sunday. Bye-bye.